To now move on quickly to our next speaker, Ian Jacobs, to my right. Fantastic. You notice his shirt is very similar to the walls, which is really quite cool. Very nice paisley. In fact, if he stands on the walls, he disappears. But one thing that's not going to disappear is the web. And certainly what the work that W3C are doing is sort of making that reach its full potential. And I think I knew 2015 you kicked off and led the W3C payments area. So I'll pass you over to Ian to tell you what they're up to, how big and complicated that particular network is, and how he's pulling that all together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. While I'm getting set up here, I just want to thank you all for coming to this session. I think you will be richly rewarded in the afterlife, which may or may not be Wednesday in the US. So let's just get set up here. One moment. Okay, it turns out I do need these. Great. Cool. Does that work? We on? Great. Again, thank you, and thanks to Payments New Zealand and The Point for having me here today. I'd like to talk about the web. Dave just mentioned there are multiple organizations that Tim Berners-Lee created. We're the standards body. Tim Berners-Lee has an opportunity to express himself on, for example, policy issues in the Web Foundation and the ODI for other issues. So today I'm going to talk to you about the web and how we're making the web better for payments in a variety of ways. So I'm going to focus on the work that I'm most closely involved with today, but I'll give a very fast overview in the interest of time of other topics that we're covering. So what does the web mean for commerce generally? So I took a quick look at what I could find rapidly about New Zealand, and it seems that New Zealand is doing pretty well in e-commerce. 4.7 billion spent on online shopping. This is data from 2016. And interestingly, e-commerce is a rising proportion of retail. So if you sort of look between those lines, it's around 7 or 8% and growing. And I think that's the interesting data for me. There are growing opportunities, and if we can make the web better, we have a real chance to have an impact on the economy. So there are similar trends in other places. This is data from the US, from the Department of Commerce. And again, similarly, it sort of hovers right now around 8% e-commerce as a proportion of all retail. So, as I said, like the main thrust of the W3C then is to make the web available to everybody and to keep adding capacity to handle new use cases across different industries. So e-commerce used to be a lot more, commerce generally was a lot more linear than it is becoming. You would look up online information about products, and then you would leave your desktop and go into a store and buy something, and that is no longer the case. You take your phone with you. You might shop online at home, but you didn't sort of shop online and in the store using the same device. Dave Birch talked about mobile, and I'll say a fair amount about that in the presentation today. You had paper coupons that you walked into the store to redeem. Digital coupons are not yet prominent on the web. There's a lot of ways to grow, and it's customer expectations that are driving a lot of this. So people, because of these technology companies and seamless user interfaces, people expect things to be fast, readily findable through search engines, social, custom, all of these things that make this e-commerce experience more complex but richer for people, and ubiquitous as well. I want to take my device everywhere and do everything that I'm used to doing in my life in New Zealand, in the United States, when I travel in Europe, here at the conference, in the room, and so forth. So this is what people expect, and from a payments perspective, I don't know how many people have used Uber or Amazon. There are examples of very easy payment experiences, and those sort of foreshadow what I'll talk about for the most part in this presentation. So customers want this rich integrated experience, and I call it web-like sort of in two senses. In one sense, It is that which we are used to using on the web, so that's going to become even more integrated into all parts of our life, what we do on the web. And secondly, web in the sense of distributed, decoupled, and so some of the solutions that we're looking at sort of adhere to those architectural principles of the web, and that's going to help them scale, and it's going to help them work on lots of devices and work in any region and so forth. So mobile is a key enabler, and this is from Forrester, just in the US, looking at different activities in a standard sort of retail context, how people are using their mobile devices to check store hours, order status, find coupons, check product availability, learn about in-store promotions. And again, so this is sort of one of the key elements of making the web better for e-commerce will be integration of the mobile experience, not as a separate thing, but integrated with also desktop and so forth. So mobile is not just using your mobile phone to do things on a mobile phone, but in conjunction with your desktop, for example, for authentication, that sort of thing. So, but when it is the principal device that you're using, there are, I'm jumping ahead. So one, also in this Nielsen report, I saw that in New Zealand specifically, people are shopping to a greater extent still on desktop than they are with mobile devices, and I found this interesting. The report concludes that the way that retailers can improve conversions is to fast-track consumer experiences on their mobile. So this is what Nielsen is recommending for retailers here and in other places. But the problem is that the web is not there yet. So we are adding features to the web to make this easier for retailers and consumers to do. So there are a number of challenges, if not met, then lead to things, as the data show, to serious loss from abandonment. So abandonment is sort of feasible on both desktop, mobile, televisions, automotive, and so forth, but there are some mobile-specific challenges like small keyboards and screens, and some more general challenges like complex checkout flows that are made worse on mobile. You just give up after a short amount of time. And in addition, the poor experience of payments today on the web, every site behaves differently. I have to give my data away to lots of different sites again and again. I have a different experience paying from an app than I do from the web, than I do from in-store. And so all of this friction, we would like to slowly erode through some of the efforts going on at W3C and elsewhere. In addition to overcoming some of these challenges of usability, poor security also creates problems of both lost loyalty and increased costs. So this is data from LexisNexis showing, again, and it was echoed this morning in the keynotes, growing costs of fraud. So what can we do? The web is now more than 25 years old, and it really wasn't designed to be an e-commerce platform. It was designed as a sort of network of static documents, but we now have pressure from different industries that are using the web, automotive, entertainment, and so forth, and as I said, changing user expectations to make it adapt and serve payments more seamlessly than it has traditionally. So merchants and the web are going to need to adapt to meet these changing customer needs. And as I mentioned, for something like Amazon and Uber, it is possible to create a good experience today because those are good examples of how it's been done. But that doesn't get you sort of web scale improvement. So if you do it one site at a time, it's very costly, and for users, it's not, it's not a significant improvement to do things differently across all these different sites. So we think standards are going to help lubricate the interactions between retailers and their customers. There are plenty of standards bodies, and we like to play nice with those standards bodies, but many of them address payments at other parts of the ecosystem than W3C. So we're not really the standards body for messages that are passing through various stakeholders in the industry. We're the standards body for the web. So for most people, that's the experience that you have through the browser. And so we need the browser to change, and we need browser vendors to work with people from other parts of the industry to make the browser meet different industry needs. So that's why we're doing this work at W3C. So very quickly, W3C has been around since 1994. It's a nonprofit. It's a consortium that is sort of funded primarily through memberships. But all of our outputs are specifications that are available freely to anybody and can be implemented at no cost and so forth. So as it was mentioned earlier, Tim Berners-Lee created the organization. There are about 425 members today who basically drive the agenda of the organization. So that's where the leadership role comes in. But we have an even bigger community of thousands, probably up to 10,000 people at this point, who are either sort of interacting through mailing lists or contributing otherwise to new ideas, incubation, and ultimately specification development. I mentioned we interact with and have participation by other standards bodies depending on the industry that W3C is working with. And we have now, over the past 20-some years, produced hundreds of web standards that make it a rich platform. So that is the sort of key thing here, is that we have a vision that, from the beginning, in fact, Tim Berners-Lee's vision is that the web would work everywhere for everybody. And but of course, everything changes very quickly. So what it means to work with video has changed over time. Video was not part of the web, and now it is. It just, we had to get there. And so HTML5 is this sort of lattice on which we hang the dozens of other standards that give access to phone features and these capabilities that let developers create rich distributed applications. So there's also this, there's more than 1 billion websites. I don't know where that data point comes from, but it sounds good, and it's probably more than that. And one interesting point is, because it's the web, there are millions of developers, and so when you develop an application for the web, not only do you reach thousands of devices, but you have a large pool of developers to draw from all over the world. So we think it's a platform worth investing in. And so today we're going to focus on making it a better platform for payments. So recently there was New York Times on the work that I'll be emphasizing today, in which Tim is quoted as saying, "We're long overdue for payments user interface for the web." So that's the main theme of the presentation today, but I will touch on some of these other topics to build a more web-like commerce experience. So the primary topic will be how to streamline checkout, make it easier and more secure for people. But I'll zip through the other things in the interest of time. Streamlining checkout, I think I can most rapidly explain through a demo. So this is, big disclaimer, this is a demo. Microsoft is implementing the standard. We'll see a bit more about that in a moment, but this is one of the participants in the group from Microsoft just created a little demo, and I think it's helpful to give a sense of how this first payment standard is going to work. So a bit of background first. Before you get to the buy button on a website, you will have given your credentials to what we call a payment app, digital wallet. We've been calling them payment apps. And in the first phase of this standards deployment, browsers will act as rudimentary payment apps. And so they already today store your address, and you've probably seen autofill, where you can tab through fields and data you've typed previously is shown to you. So browsers are just going to do more to say, hey, I'm storing this shipping address and this credit card. So what you see here is a demo that basically shows, once you've stored a few cards in your browser and some shipping addresses, you can then visit any website that supports the standard and simply give that data to the site. And so you don't type again and again the information. So it's Uber-like, but it goes one step further because all the information is kept on the user side. Now, the asterisk is it may be on the device, it may be in the cloud, you don't care, but it's user controlled. So I'll just jump to here, let's all look at the code in detail. No. Let's see. So this is the, again, demo interface where you see you have this opportunity to select, a card, and we expect browsers to distinguish themselves in the market by providing useful user experiences like, hey, you visited this site last time and paid with this, so I'll put that at the top, or you can set defaults and so forth. So here there's still some user interactions, but we expect it to become simpler and simpler to do because the standard allows browsers to know exactly what's going on. If you pick a shipping address, there's a fake call to the web to just give you a little delay, and then you have given that address, there's an option. Now what I can't seem to show here is, let's see if I can move this up. I can't seem to get onto the screen the bottom of this. Let's see if we shrink this down. There we go. So it basically shows you the updated total based on the shipping options that were based on the shipping address. So there's a little bit of back and forth with the merchant site, and in the end, it shows me the total, and I basically say, I authorize that, and it's done. So again, that was slower than it would be. In practice, and with browser configurations, it will be even easier. And the idea is that that's all you will do everywhere on the web. So here's the actual current Google beta view. So Google's out in front with their implementation, and there on the left-hand side, it shows you near the top of the mobile screen. So this is for Chrome running on Android. It shows you to whom you're making a payment, the amount of the payment, the shipping address, and you sort of pick one or the other shipping option, and you choose your payment instrument, and then it was way far down the screen, so I cut it off. There's an OK button, and you would basically hit the buy button, see this stuff, and hit the OK button, and be done. So that is what we would like to see sort of everywhere on the web. And so a few ways to think about this. The first way to think about this is it basically gets rid of forms. So a lot of people have said, as I've started to explain this, what about the regulatory implications of this? And so my quick answer to that is, one way to think about this is it gets rid of forms. It just, instead of you typing the stuff again, you give it through an API instead of returning a form. So from a regulatory perspective, it should be the same. But there's now storage on the user side. So I'm still waiting to hear back from people whether that actually changes things, the fact that there's possibly storage on the user side. But so there are some security positive side effects to doing this. Today, you can, through JavaScript, pop windows up and maybe confuse users or fish for information. But now that the merchant is handing off this final phase of checkout to the browser, it's native browser Chrome that will pop up, and that will be recognizable and hard to spoof. So there's a security side effect. And then mostly we see a bunch of simplified user experience benefits. So again, I don't have to type things multiple times across sites. I'm still giving the data to the site or whoever's providing their checkout, and they're still going to have to manage the data on their end. But with less user effort. One of the key things that I haven't mentioned yet is the way this works is the merchant, when they call the API, declares the different payment methods that they accept, and the user has a set of ways to pay, and the browser does this intersection computation and only shows the relevant user payment methods for that transaction. So that's going to avoid the NASCAR effect, and the user is just going to see a very small number of relevant payment methods. And again, thanks to these configurations, it will be easier and easier to find the thing that you are wanting to pay with instead of spending time scanning the page. So we talked to Alibaba. Alibaba thinks that's a super benefit from their experience. Like, I hadn't thought of it. Alibaba happens to love that. It's always going to be in the same place when I go to pay, and that's a big usability benefit. And then I mentioned browsers will distinguish themselves through further optimizations to sort of arrive at one click everywhere on the web. So just a couple of notes. This is not a payment method. We are not doing payment processing. This is principally about an improved user experience. So we are making it easier to collect and return data in a standard way to merchants. And secondly, we are not dealing with all possible issues in this particular standard, and that's because we modularize things in the web standard stack. So things like authentication and strong security are dealt with elsewhere. So I'll mention a few of those things in the presentation, but that's another question that I get a lot. Well, what about authentication? That's being dealt with. We hope that we can, I'll tell you a little bit in a second. So, I mentioned a sort of first phase of this API, which is browsers will store credit card information and make it easier for you to click on browser interface for returning that card data to merchants. But that would create a very sort of narrow ecosystem where browsers now play this prominent role, and others that have payment apps in like Alipay and Samsung Pay and Apple Pay and Android Pay would not appear in that list of things you can pay with. So the second standard that is the complement of the first one is what we're calling third-party payment apps. So we need to define how these pieces of software, whether they're native or whether they're web-based, are handed control, and then the user does things. For example, if it's a banking app, they might integrate payments with mobile banking. If it's a retail app, they might integrate payments with loyalty programs and so forth. So we're looking forward to this rich ecosystem of payment apps that, again, will show up in this list of things you can pay with when the merchant accepts them. So, so basically, people will register payment apps, and then the browser will help determine which payment apps are relevant for a particular transaction based on what the merchant accepts. They'll show up, you click the thing, and the data goes back to the merchant. So we have heard also mention of tokenization. So today, for example, you don't really have tokenization on the web. This is a great opportunity to improve security of payments by making it easier to bring tokenization to the web. Today, I don't think, for the most part, you can use a digital wallet when you are browsing and pay for things. Apple is the exception. They published an API recently. Apple's in the working group. I have a bit on that in a moment. But again, that's a very narrow opportunity. We're looking for web-wide ways to bring things like tokenization into all transactions. So, so some of the benefits I think it's useful to highlight from the merchant experience perspective. This simpler user interface and consistent user interface across websites and across devices and across browsers, we believe will increase conversions. I did see some data from Google who talked about this at the Google I/O conference in the spring. They said through autofill alone, they see 25% greater conversions. We think this will be better than that because autofill still requires you to tab through fields, and it's still a complex user experience. So we think this is going to go a long way to increasing conversions. The retailers have an opportunity to publish these payment apps and to integrate payments with customer-facing experiences that involve things like loyalty and points, but they're not there yet. That's one of the other topics we're going to mention. We think this having a standard pipe through which to send payment credentials and payment authorizations will make it easier to bring new payment methods to the web. And so tokenization is the first one we're looking to. And so W3C would not be doing a tokenization standard, but for example, we talk to EMV and we say, hey, look, we have a new pipe through which you can send EMV tokens. Would you like to work with us to make it easier for app developers to send EMV tokens? So those are the sorts of conversations we have. And one of the things that leads to cart abandonment is people in some cases can't pay with the payment method that they prefer, and by sort of simplifying the user interface, we think that merchants can sort of show less information on their checkout pages and yet still match user preferred payment methods. It's just done invisibly by the browser that shows you, hey, you want to pay with Klarna? You can pay with Klarna. It turns out that the merchant just had a big green buy button, but you want to pay with Klarna? You can pay with Klarna. But today, if you support hundreds of payment methods, you don't show all of them on your web page, and so people don't know that they can pay with them, and they don't. So we think that will also improve the sort of user preference side of the story. So from a payment gateway perspective, we think this, well, one of the benefits of the web generally is you can reach more devices more easily. It sort of just works. And so we think that you get interop at a lower cost, and it will become easier and lower cost to build checkout flows, so those that provide those will have an easier time doing it. So I put a little rudimentary diagram in here again to sort of summarize how the thing works. Merchants have a web page, they call the API, the browser shows all of the user's payment apps that could be used to support that payment, and the user pushes the button, the data goes back to the merchant, and it's done. So I have a big list of slides of who's involved. So a lot of the tech companies that were mentioned this morning are involved in the work. Also some banks, some merchants, and so forth. Microsoft and Google are implementing and had announced publicly they hope to see this for the holiday season this year. We might not get there, but we're getting close. Apple's in the group, and they have an API that is we're converging on the two APIs, so that's a good story. Mozilla and Opera are working on this. Samsung's working on this. So it's not too late, and we're still early in the third-party payment app development, but this is happening, and there are working sites out there where you can use this today. So very quickly, since I only have a couple of minutes left, other work that's going on at W3C that is sort of, again, building the web into a more robust and useful platform. In terms of security, we have now widely deployed crypto primitives. App developers used to not have access to sort of fundamental crypto primitives from operating systems. Now they do, so they can create more secure apps. Strong authentication. PSD2 was mentioned in previous talk, and we hear that strong authentication is going to be mandated in many cases. The FIDO Alliance has developed some technologies to bring biometrics and other token-based security mechanisms to the web. They brought that work to W3C, and we started a working group called the Web Authentication Working Group that published their first draft in May. So again, the payments API that I showed you doesn't deal with this, but overall the web should improve in security as we begin to see adoption of strong authentication, in part to get rid of weak passwords. We also have tons of work going on that I won't detail to sort of secure the integrity and confidentiality of interactions on the web generally. And so there's because the platform is becoming richer with a lot of code running, it raises new security concerns. So we have the Web Application Security Group, whose job it is to sort of make sure that apps can run in a secure fashion, even though they're distributed over the web. And one piece of work in an incubation phase is bringing secure hardware to the web. Today, as an web app developer, you can't access secure elements. So Gemalto, for example, is leading some work to see if we can bring secure hardware access into web applications. Verifiable claims is about exchanging information in a trusted fashion about assertions made. This is very much in the incubation phase, but it may relate to, for example, lowering the cost of KYC compliance. Can I make assertions about identity in a secure fashion more easily over the web? Payment method innovation, a very interesting piece of work brought to W3C by Ripple. So Ripple has a sort of place in the cryptocurrency space, but they would like to make it easier for somebody from any ledger to pay somebody else in any other ledger. And so they are working on the interledger protocol at W3C. It's not on the standards track yet, but it's getting a lot of interest from people to see if you can bridge disparate payment systems with a bunch of guarantees that people are paid, and mediators who facilitate that protocol have incentives to do so, and so forth. So that's another piece of work, more in the background and not as much in the browser. And digital offers. So we've just launched a new group to look at bringing loyalty and coupons to the web. So just as it's easy to now pay with the new API by clicking on a thing, we would like to be able to select coupons, for example, and redeem those in the same interaction. So these are all enhancements to come. And there's a whole set of other activities, as I said, to make the web a ubiquitous platform that supports all the things you would need for commerce. So in closing, I hope that you'll join the conversation at W3C and help advance these projects. This is a photo from Tim Berners-Lee, his famous "This is for everyone about the web" at the 2012 Olympics. So again, thank you for your attention, and come get involved and help build the web. Thank you.